Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources.
One of the things about creativity and being creative that's so important is being available for inspiration. So that instant between when an idea sparks and when you verbalize it is so important because so many of us, the idea comes in and before we even give voice to it, we go, oh no, that would never work. Or, oh, I can't. And so one of the things that we can do is start widening that space and allowing the idea to spark and then to be okay and courageous enough to put words to it, to put form to it, and perhaps even to make a plan with it and not discount it outright. So that's one of the most important things that we can do almost immediately is to step into the possibility that our idea has merit, whatever that idea is, because creativity at its core is thinking up something no one's ever thought of before.
You're listening to the Positively Living podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zawrotny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a coach certified in time and stress management, helping clients make space for what matters most in their lives. Join me each episode and we'll talk about decluttering, stress management, habits, personalized productivity, gratitude, and so much more. I understand the overwhelm of life because I'm a wife, mom to kids and cats, and a former caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. What would you say if I told you mindfulness is key to unlocking creativity and innovation, or that slowing down can make you more productive? As a society, I think we struggle to honor the quiet moments because we don't see them as necessary or productive. My goal for today's episode is to get you thinking differently and to share these ideas with others so we can banish the busy badge of honor once and for all. I also want to encourage you to dream and create and share your ideas with the world. It can be a scary thing, but you truly never know the ripple effect you might have in this world, and my guest and I are here to encourage you to take that chance. Today, I welcome Izolda Trakhtenberg to the Positively Living podcast. Izolda believes innovation isn't just about the latest fad, it's about creating and collaborating mindfully. This refreshing approach has made her a sought-after speaker, educator, and coach for creatives and business leaders. For years, Izolda traveled the world as a NASA master trainer, transforming people's perspectives on our planet. She's released 4 books on communication, collaboration, and self-improvement. Nowadays, you'll find her speaking at conferences, looking for the next great ocean beach, or singing for hundreds of people, all while interviewing peak performers on creative leadership, innovation, and mindfulness on her hit podcast, The Innovative Mindset. I was honored to be on Izolda's podcast talking about, what else, creativity and clutter. Today, we're still talking creativity, but we're bringing mindfulness into the mix. And what do I always say? It's all connected. Mindfulness, which is being present, is actually a form of mental decluttering. And when we clear our minds and let thoughts and emotions flow, we're in the best state to be creative and productive. Today we cover what mindfulness is and isn't, and what it means to be creative and to lend your ideas and voice to the world. Izolda reminds us that what we know has value, and she shares some fantastic frameworks to help us all embrace our worth and our willingness to step into our own creative genius. Our conversation winds through curiosity, fear, courage, possibility, flexibility, resilience, and music, which are topics covered often in this podcast. You can find these topics by searching titles, and I recommend especially checking out episodes 30 and 31 on fear and authenticity. If you have an idea or a message you want to share with the world, I'm here to support you in a variety of ways. Connect on social media. I'm at @positively_Lisa on Instagram or at @positivelyproductive on Facebook. Book a single productivity boost session with me to go over all the ideas and get clear on the best action steps for you. Join the Positively Living community for group support, exclusive content, and co-working sessions to help you get the things done. And please keep listening to the podcast. Also, could you do me a favor? If you find value in these episodes, please share them with others, whether through a link or screenshot. And if you haven't yet, could you please leave a review? It helps others find the podcast and benefit from the conversations we're having here. Thank you. Now let's join Izolda and talk mindfulness and creativity. Welcome, Izolda Trakhtenberg, to the Positively Living podcast. I am so delighted to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm really thrilled to be here. This is exciting because you are so incredible and so fabulous, and you really honoring me with the possibility and the opportunity to chat with you. This is great.
Wow. Okay. I am humbled, but how about we turn the tables to you and your fabulousness, because I know about it, but I want everyone else to know about it. And I would love if you would start by telling us a bit about who you are, who you help, and what makes you light up.
Wow. Wow. Those are three fascinating questions to someone who probably isn't me, but here we go. Who I am a coach and a podcaster. I'm also an author. I'm an immigrant. I was born in the former Soviet Union, so English is actually my fourth language, not my first or second. My family immigrated a long time ago. We just celebrated the 47th anniversary of having arrived in the USA. It's quite something. And so I overcame a public speaking phobia using creativity and wrote a book on that and went into a space where now I help people find their own creative genius in order to thrive and shine at work and at home. And I do this with individuals. And I also go in and teach creative thinking and innovation and collaborative sort of creativity to companies and organizations. So it's a sort of take what you learned from when you were very young and bring it into the adult world and see if you can help other people get to that same place. So that's really what makes me light up is when I go and I teach one of my work in harmony workshops, I go into companies and organizations and I teach them how to sing together. And that's how we develop sort of teamwork and creative collaborations is they start the hour and a half, a disparate group, they cannot sing, some of them. By the time they're done, they've sung together in perfect harmony. And that is one of the most amazing things that has ever happened to me is the opportunity to help people do that.
That sounds like such a powerful moment of how we can come together and interact as it's not just a team, because I know from my music background that it's even more than that, that you actually become one unit when you're working together, right?
Yeah, and the NIH has done some amazing studies on that. When people sing together in a choir situation, their heartbeats actually synchronize. So I know, isn't that amazing? They can be different sides of the room, doesn't matter. But if they're singing together, their heartbeats become as one. And if that doesn't build a team, I don't know what will.
Wow. Okay, I need a moment for that. That's so powerful.
So powerful. Yeah.
Along the lines of creativity, and what I really love, and I mean, you have it in the name of your podcast, is this idea of innovation. So, how those two play together. But I'd love to back up a little bit and talk about what it means to be creative, what it means to unlock your creative genius, and how you approach that.
Wow. Well, you're singing my song, as it were. A couple of different things come to mind immediately. One of the things about creativity and being creative that's so important is being available for inspiration.
Mm.
So that instant between when an idea sparks and when you verbalize it is so important because so many of us the idea comes in and before we even give voice to it we go, oh no, that would never work, or oh, I can't. And so one of the things that we can do is start widening that space and allowing the idea to spark and then to be okay and courageous enough to put words to it, to put form to it, and perhaps even to make a plan with it and not discount it outright. So that's one of the most important things that we can do almost immediately is to step into the possibility that our idea has merit. whatever that idea is, because creativity at its core is thinking up something no one's ever thought of before. and and we allow ourselves the opportunity and the grace to do that. We can make magic happen every single day and every single minute.
I'm inspired by what you're saying to also think that creativity is often, it's not just that like no one's ever thought of it, but like that you're bringing something unique to whatever it might be that maybe we've shared, right? And that's a beautiful thing because it's so easy to discount, like, oh, well, my take on it doesn't really matter. Well, yes, it does.
Exactly. No one comes to this idea, whatever it is, with your experience, your thoughts, your notions, your heart, and your spirit. So when you're in that space of giving yourself permission to be creative, that's what allows it to come through. You and I are both musicians, for example. How you approach a piece will be completely different than from how I approach it, just because we come at it with
Mhm.
different histories. Both are equally valid, they're just different perspectives. And that's one of the things that I love so much about something I call the aim high framework. And what that is aim high means aim is to be agile, innovative, and mindful. And high is in order to get to the point where you are healthy, inspired, grateful, and happy. Those are sort of the goals, but the part where we're mindful of that moment of instance of creativity and we allow ourselves to be agile and flexible enough to actually bring it forth because we are courageous enough to try it. And that's where innovation comes from, is when we are able to go, I have this idea, I'm going to try it, and I'm going to stay flexible enough to see if it changes as I go along. And that's when I get to innovate. And innovation isn't just for us, it is for anyone whose lives we touch.
There we go. Right there. That's the moment. It's like I'm thinking about how creativity is a gift to ourselves, but we need to remember that approaching whatever it is, whatever, like you said,
Mhm.
it's idea based. It's take an idea and run with it and do something with it. And that in and of itself is creativity. Well, what kind of impact can it have on others?
Wow, it's such a great question. I'm going to give you another. I'm full of frameworks today. This is another framework that I love. I was invited by the folks at Spotify corporate to do a podcast on mindful creativity with their employees, and they're a bunch of engineers. So the person who hired me said, yeah, you worked at NASA, so you can talk to scientists and engineers, right? Yes, I can. Great. Talk to them about creativity and mindfulness. And I went, ooh, so this is focused creativity and mindfulness. These folks need to hear it from the perspective of I have a very technical mind, and so therefore I need to know how to become mindful and creative within that framework. And a lot of them were a little nervous about it, but here's what I did, and I think it's eye-opening if you look at it this way. Take a data point. Let's talk like we're engineers for a minute, right? You take a data point. What you know is that it's a dot. It's one data point you don't know. Translate that to music. Let's say it's the frequency of a note. So 440 hertz is an A. It vibrates at 440 times per second, roughly. And that is our data point. We don't know anything about it except for it's got a frequency. That's the science. That's great. Then you add knowledge and experience to it. And that is when you take all of the different frequencies and you categorize them. You put names to them. So you'll have different notes at different frequencies. So now you've analyzed it and categorized it, and you can put it into sort of a way of manipulating them and manipulating in a good way, of moving them around, creating something. That's when you get to the third spot. You create because you take what you've categorized and you move it into a symphony or a song or a fiddle tune, whatever it is. You have now taken that and made it into something that flows into that creative part. And then you come into wisdom. And wisdom is when you take all of what you now know, the frequencies, the analysis of knowing what the notes are and naming them, the creativity from using that analysis and knowledge and creating something into what will benefit others. And how do we do that? Music to me is the universal language, right?
Mm.
So I've gone into countries, I've traveled a lot, and I've gone into countries where nobody speaks the same language as I do. I'm not familiar with the culture, What do? I find a way to make music with people. And as soon as you do, we're communicating. We can help one another. We can be in the same space. You can look at it from the perspective of, for example, in the military, they use music to wake people up. They use music when someone passes away to honor them. Marches have inspired people to go to war, but still, they've been inspirational. Think about the feeling we have when somebody plays a national anthem. It fills you with a certain, what's the word? Reverence. My brain is
Reverence.
not, yes, I was like relevance. That's true too, but reverence, right? So
Yes.
music can change us. Singing together can synchronize our heartbeats. We can form around a common goal because we now have the wisdom to know that it's not just creating that's important. It's creating to be of benefit to others.
Yeah. Well, coming from a music background, I feel this intensely. I've experienced it. I've played taps before.
That's what
And
it is, taps.
yeah, that's for when someone passes away. And those are powerful. And there's something about that language, I think, that gets to people very quickly. It's like a
Hmm.
fast language,
Hmm.
in a way. But that aside, you don't even have to be a music lover to understand, again, that framework of there being, like you said, data points that you collect, you understand, you pull together, and then you synchronize or sort or work through in a way such that you can get a message across,
Absolutely.
and that's what can change lives, right?
Absolutely. I think that that moment when you come to the realization that what you know has value, first and foremost, we all have to remember that. We have to remember that what we know, who we are intrinsically, it has value. And once you realize that and you own that, then there's a wonderful quote in my favorite book called Gibbon's Decline and Fall, where there's a character in the book who teaches women mostly, but women to take back their own power. And by the time this quote is said, she's no longer alive. But what she said was, find your spot on a sun warmed rock, go there, build your house there. And then when you're ready, reach down and pull others up. And when I read that, I was like, oh, my life changed because that's the whole point is we own that. We own that notion that we, again, have value. We work to make ourselves stable and grounded and living in the sun. And then when we're there, we reach down and help up others who are still in the process. That's where the magic happens is when you realize, yes, I am at a place where I can help others and you do so willingly and freely, and then everybody benefits.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be complicated either in simply telling your story. And you and I have some fun together on Instagram. And I just recently shared a story from someone else about, the idea that your stories are not for you. It's like they're for others. And there's another one. I can't remember the exact words, but the concept is basically that, your story and sharing of your story will be like, a manual for others to survive, basically.
Absolutely. And that moment of sharing what you know, what your experience is, I don't know if we all have specific, unique experiences that no one can understand. I think we can all understand on the deepest level someone who has a completely different life story than you do. You still have some of the same notions, some of the same fears. And if someone is farther along on their journey than you are, their experience can benefit you because you can see yourself in them and vice versa. We can all, when I teach in schools, when I go into schools and I teach, 10-year-olds, 6-year-olds often teach me more than I knew, than I thought I was capable of knowing because I witnessed their generosity. I witnessed their kindness to each other. I witnessed their willingness to explore. They're not thinking they're teaching me anything. I'm supposed to be teaching them, but I come out the richer because I was their student for an hour and a half, and it's magic.
Well, they're sharing freely and without reservation, which I think is a takeaway for all of us. And I coach coaches, and when I do, there's often this fear that comes up. And that's one of the things that you touched upon here that I think is such an important element of this is releasing the fear. And
Mhm.
the fear comes up, which of course, we talk about in the coaching world, or actually I think just throughout the world, imposter syndrome, right? That's a
Mm.
phrase that comes up a lot. But
Mhm.
really it's about saying, well, who am I to
Right.
say this thing, or what would I know, or what would I give? And one of my favorite concepts to share and to coach is the idea that you need only be a step or two ahead to show someone an important part of their path.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what's interesting? The question that I tell my clients when I'm coaching, and I put this in my most recent book, Speak from Within,
Mm-hmm.
there are times when you have no idea what to do next. You just nothing. So I asked myself a silly question, but it really works. And here's the question. If I were someone who knew what to do right now, what would I do? And it's amazing how just that silly little question often brings, oh, if I knew what to do, I'd do X. Well, then X must be the way to go. Sometimes we have to step to the side a little bit, and instead of going, I'm going to bulldoze my way through this, go, okay, wait, hang on, maybe what if I step to the side and I see things a little differently and I change my perspective? So that's a great question to ask yourself. If I did know what to do, what would I do? And your subconscious, which I'm convinced knows everything anyway, will sort of bubble up the answer for you, because you're no longer trying to do it consciously and trying to push your way through it. You're letting yourself wonder. You're letting yourself be curious. And
Mm-hmm.
that's so important. And then another question that I ask myself when I'm stuck is, what is one small thing I can do right now to make things better? That is such a powerful question, because sometimes we get lost in these huge changes we're trying to make, and we forget that small steps will get you miles away. So that's so important too, is to remember you can do something small and still make a huge ripple effect, and then you'll see your path, and then you can move forward.
You are speaking my coaching, of course, because the small steps are what create the habits and what help you develop that confidence to then share the story again or do the next thing, or whatever it is that are the steps you take.
For sure.
But going back to this really amazing question about, well, if I did know what to do, what would that be? The phrase that popped into my mind when you described that is a deep knowing.
Mm.
And I think that's a wonderful segue into exploring this concept of mindfulness a little bit more and how you connect that to creativity. So, how do you see
I love this.
mindfulness?
I'm like tingling all over. So, mindfulness to me, one of the things with mindfulness is that there is this notion that you have to be a guru up on the mountain, and that only people who breathe a rarefied sort of air can be mindful. And if you know me at all, you know that ain't me, right? So that's one of the first things we have to sort of accept about mindfulness, is that we can all do it. And it's not a matter of having the incense going and the candles lit it's not that. It's being present, it's being aware. And one of my favorite moments in a book by the Tibetan Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, called Being Peace, is when he found transcendence doing the dishes. And that moment of feeling the water flowing over his hands while he was soaping up a dish, he said, I found that that moment was a miracle because I was completely present and available to the experience. And ultimately, that's what mindfulness is. So when we first started chatting, I said that moment between when an idea occurs to you and when you actually give words to it, that's the place of where mindfulness and creativity intersect, because we are all benefited from slowing down just a little and being present to our lives, to our thoughts, to our notions, to the people and environments that we're in. That's mindfulness. It's not just meditation. It's about that presence of mind to go, I'm here and it's right now. And I'm
Hmm.
not worried about yesterday, and I'm not right now planning for tomorrow. Instead, I'm taking the time to just be here. And from that space, from that balanced sort of fulcrum, if you will, when you're there, you can go in any direction. And creativity comes from when you allow the what if to happen, you're present to it because you're being mindful, and then you follow that path to see where it leads you.
And that mindful moment too is so healing because the more that we practice allowing whatever's happening, because in that in between, that is where the fear bubbles up.
Absolutely.
Right? That is where all the questions and the uncertainty and also too, the mind that takes us into all the different steps and overthinking, ask me how I know. And
Right there with you.
right. And so all those things that come up, and when you can sit with them and be present with them and let them go through, one of the things you mentioned before was this idea that you have that time there to be curious. And I love curiosity because, and we've said it so many times on the Positively Living podcast, when you're curious, it takes away the judgment.
Completely. And that's the thing about judgment, isn't it? It automatically tries to tamp you down.
Yeah.
I've never heard of an instance of judgment where judgment go, yes, I'm free. Instead it makes you go, oh, then maybe this wasn't such a good idea. And you can feel things shrinking.
Yeah.
You can feel things getting smaller. And to me, creativity is an act of facing your fears. It's an act of courage. And focused, it becomes innovation. That's the thing about, to me, an innovator is a creative with a to-do list. It's someone who's like the washing machine is my favorite example. The woman who invented the washing machine, I'm sure she was just darn tired of sitting there with a basin and washing the dishes by hand, and went, there's got to be a better way. And I know this with personal experience. My first few years in the Soviet Union, that's how we did dishes, wash clothes. We did dishes in the sink, but we washed clothes with a basin and by hand. And part of my job was to help my mother do this. And there was no such thing as a washing machine. Nobody had them. So when we moved and finally came to the USA, and I saw my first washing machine, and my parents got it home, it was a miracle because I was no longer going to have to be scrubbing shirts. You could just put it all in. And of course, the first time I put it all in, I used entirely too much detergent and broke the washing machine. So that was not good. But the point is that it was a way that innovation allowed more freedom for other things in your life. And that wouldn't have happened without that need to have it happen, and then facing the fear of, oh, what if it fails? You face that fear and look what happens. You literally change the lives of billions of people.
Right. And so that's where we start redefining what failure is and how we're perceiving it. And well, that's a whole different podcast episode, right?
We'll do that again sometime.
Absolutely. But in there, I think you're edging into these descriptions that, hit upon one of my favorite things, which is productivity, but
Yay.
productivity in a different kind of way. The mantra that I live by, that Positively Productive Systems lives by, is do less, live more, breathe easier, right? So
Mm,
in the do less, in the understanding that when we're talking about productivity, we're talking about creating space for what matters and using streamlining and efficiency. And to me, that is creativity, right?
for
It
sure.
is, right, opening up ourselves to how can I do this? So in that moment when you're being mindful, being present, feeling the fears, processing things, is that not also the time to figure out a how, right? That something could be done? Or would you say that comes maybe a little bit later?
I think it's a gestalt, actually. I think there are times when one thing comes first, and I think there are times when something else comes first. To me, innovation is wonderful. Innovation that solves a problem is better. So
Yeah.
so when you are in that space of going, well, how could I do this? Then you answer the question. But when you get inspired to do something and then you have to figure out the how, then it's a different order, but it's no less valuable. Both ways are the ways that will allow you, again, to make things perhaps easier, to make things flow faster or
Hmm.
slower, depending on what you're trying to achieve. Because there are times when I'm in that creative mode, when I have to actively slow down because it gets too fast and there's too much go, and I feel like I have to turn the faucet down a little bit because I can't keep track of my ideas.
Yes.
And working the other way around, there are times when I need inspiration, and I cannot just push through. right? There are times when you're like, okay, I'm going to push through. And the problem with that is that no longer is inspiration. That's perseverance,
Yeah.
which is not a bad thing. But I'm a big proponent, like you said, of slowing down and slowing down in a way that takes you out of what you're trying to achieve. And instead, I let the librarian who lives in my head do the work for me for a little while. And her name is Edna, and she looks curiously like Edna Mode from The Incredibles. She's Edna Mode is one of my heroes.
Mhm.
And what I'll do is I'll sort of send it back to my subconscious. I'll go, okay, I have this thorny problem that I'm trying to innovate or create. And I let my subconscious, I go, okay, subconscious, take it, run with it. And I'm going to go for a bike ride. And instead of trying to push through, I take myself out and I give myself permission to step completely away from it and let my subconscious do its thing for a while, because it our brains are the fastest and most powerful computer ever, right?
Right.
So we can come up with answers no one has ever dreamed of before. We just have to give ourselves the opportunity to do that. And one of the ways to do that is to step out of the push and instead allow the answer to pull, you know?
Thank you. Step out of the push. And you just beautifully described what I'm talking about with productivity and how it's not all go, 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 do, do,
Absolutely.
do. And that slower can equal productive. Also, you get 1,700 bonus points for the use of the word gestalt. And
Yes.
woohoo! So you're a high scorer today. And, it's this idea of allowing, right?
Mm.
That's really what we're talking about here. What order is it going to be? What's going to happen? Sometimes you're going to be like, I got nothing. And so you step away. Sometimes you're like, I got all the things. I work with a lot of multi-passionate people, love
Mm.
them. M1. Thank you. And
Right there with you.
right again. And it reminds me of like when you're pressing the gas pedal and that engine is revving, but you have not shifted gears yet. You're like, you either have to shift gears or like back off. I don't know where I'm going with this metaphor, but the point is that there are so many ways that we can be truly efficient, get to the things that we want to get to, which ultimately is productivity, while slowing down. And I think that's, I don't know, it's like, is it not accepted in society, or is it that we want to believe it but we don't believe it? I don't know what's going on with that, but I see it all the time.
It's so interesting that you say that. And believe it or not, it brings me to mind of the federal government.
Hmm.
Yes, it does. And let me tell you what I'm talking about. But
Elaborate, would you?
so I worked for a government agency for many years. I worked for NASA, and one of the things that I saw was you get a yearly budget, and at the end of the fiscal year, you would see the people who strings running around like crazy, going, "What do you need? I have extra money in the budget. Tell me what you need, and I can buy it as long as it's done before the end of the day on September 30th." And so everyone would be rushing, rushing, rushing. And why? Because if they didn't spend all the money in their budget, they wouldn't get as much budget the next year.
Right.
And here's the issue with that is that instead of going, let's be measured about this, let's figure out and use up the resources that we have. And if we don't use them all up, that means they're in the bank for future use. They would rush like crazy to try and fix that.
Mm.
And it would never work because they were in that situation and in that place of running around with their hair on fire. And then things got left off and then things got forgotten. And then, but it was that uncertainty, that fear that they wouldn't have as many resources that put them in that space. So when you're talking about the notion that we don't honor slowing down, it's endemic. We don't honor it because we feel like if we slow down, then someone else will have or get what we had, that something we have will get taken away from us. And I disagree. I think so much of this is intrinsic. We have the opportunity to share, so if I have resources that you need, great, I'll share them. If you have
Mhm.
resources that you have that I need, you could share them. And if we both do that, then nobody runs out of money by the end of September 30th, and no one has to run around with their hair on fire because we're all okay with everyone has the same to use up the resources that they need to use up without having to go, oh, let me hold on to it and be greedy is not quite the right word, but afraid maybe is the right word.
Yeah, I think it does come back to fear. And of course, what you're describing makes me think of FOMO and fear of missing out ultimately.
Mm,
So even if it's not that you're unwilling to share so much, it might simply be that you're holding on tightly to concepts or whatever it is that you're doing because you are worried you might miss out, or that, there's just some kind of, I feel like, this built up intrinsic deadline that exists with all of us. And
yeah.
yes, slowing down is counterintuitive, but I promise you, you heard it here. Maybe not first, but I hope, I hope in a way that really gets to your heart and soul from Izolda and me, that slowing down will open up the creative genius. It will open up your productivity and it will open up a new world.
For
That being
sure.
said, any tips or like final thoughts in terms of something we could do today to kind of shift this gear of ours and embrace this idea?
There are a couple of different things. First of all, I would like to encourage, if you're listening to this, I'm encouraging you to have one thought first thing in the morning. And that is, I am enough, I have enough, I do enough. Regardless of whether or not the rest of your day is like that, if you start your day that way, maybe even write it down, that will help. The other thing is, I'm going to invite you, if you're listening to this, to maybe take a blank piece of paper and write down what you did for fun when you were a kid. Did
Mm.
you write stories? Did you make up games? Did you bang on pops with wooden spoons, much to your mother's chagrin? What did you do? What was the thing that made you so happy that gave you the greatest joy? Because one of the things that happens as we get older is we start either judging what we used to do or we forget about it entirely. And so I invite all of my clients to get back to that very early space and go, what was my fun thing? For me, it was singing. I loved to sing. That was my thing, right? So I am a professional vocalist, but I don't have to be. I didn't have to be. You know, I have a dear friend who uh, wanted to be an astronaut her whole life. She went to space camp, she did all this stuff, and she was not able to qualify. But instead, she ended up working for NASA and was a communications officer for the International Space Station because it turns out she's also a fabulous writer. So her life didn't go into the astronaut field, but boy, she approximated it, right? And to me, that is a real definition of success is when you get to a place where you're like, yeah, I maybe can't walk on Mars, but boy, I can be part of the team that goes and does the Martian training in Arizona, or I can write about it or I can help be part of that story. So so trace that for yourself and see how what you're doing today applies to what you wanted to do when you were 6.
Yeah.
And explore that path a little bit and see if there are things that you can bring in to what you're doing today that relate, that connect back to that 6-year-old and what they wanted to do.
Right. And here you are connecting to joy and connecting to fun, which of course
Sure.
our enjoyment is what's going to keep us doing the things that we need to do. So anytime we can match those together and find, this sort of this combination, the sweet spot, if you will, right?
For
That's what
sure.
you're talking about. And speaking of fun, I'm ready to have a rapid wrap up with you if you're ready for me.
Sure. Let's do it.
Okay. So, speaking of fun and joy, I'd love for you to fill in the blank. The song that always makes me dance is.
Interestingly, it is probably right now anyway, it's called B-Side by Flynn. That makes me dance right now. In fact, I tell my Amazon Echo, I can't say her name outright, to play that song first thing in the morning because that's how I wake up.
I love that. Okay, so that's not only making you dance, that's making you wake up. We'll be sure to add that to the Positively Living Podcast Spotify dance playlist, volume 2. So it'll be
Awesome.
on there. Fantastic. Okay. Now, the quote or mantra I share all the time is?
I think I already shared it. I am enough. I have enough. I do enough. That's
That works. That works. Remember that one. That's a beautiful takeaway for today. And last but not least, the resource book or app that makes my life easier.
the book that I recommend to everybody and their grandmother is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. It's a 12-step program of creative recovery, and I think it's amazing.
Wonderful. And on a special note, would you please share what or whom are you grateful for today, Izolda?
I'm grateful for my husband, who just got back from being away for a few weeks. And I'm grateful for my beautiful best friend, Kristen. Every day, she's part of my gratitude journal. And my cats and my sisters, I have to say, they're part of my gratitude journal every day, too.
Love it. I am grateful for you. I'm grateful for our conversation, for having connected. I'm grateful for Pamela for introducing us. So special
Yay!
shout out to Pamela. And I know that those listening would love to connect with you more. So where can we find you online? Where should we be looking for you?
Best place right now is probably Instagram at Izolda T. I'm at Izolda T just about everywhere. So if you're on TikTok or LinkedIn or not Facebook, because somebody else got to Izolda T on Facebook first, and then IzoldaT.com is my website. And if you're into my books, then it's IzoldaTauthor.com.
Okay. And I will make sure to have those links in the show notes to make it super easy. And of course, if you follow me on Instagram already, find me because I'm following Izolda. So thank you so much, Izolda, for shining your light in this world and for sharing it with us today.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate you having me. This was great fun and a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.